Shrimp aquaculture is mainly done by embankment aquaculture method, which is shown in the picture on the left upper side. The picture shown on the lower side shows shrimp species which is or was found in Korea. Can you see the upper right side, the facility? That is a raceway in the system for shrimp aquaculture, which is a more advanced aquaculture facilities. So using this water raceway, the method, the amount of the shrimp aquaculture was increased. Also, can you see the kuruma, the prawn, in the lower the side? You can see those and the different species of the shrimps. Let's take a closer look on the seaweed aquaculture production. In terms of production volume, total production volume of farmed seaweed increased on 2000s. Labor was the most important species for seaweed aquaculture in 1970. In 1970, its production volume occupied more than 80% of total aquaculture seaweed production. However, production volume of sea mustard and Japanese kelp started to increase in 1980 and 2010. For now, labor, kelp, and sea mustard are three major farmed seaweed species in Korea. It is followed by brown the seaweed and the green labor in order of their production volume. Can you see in the table in this slide? As of 2017, the labor production volume is more than 500,000. Japanese kelp, its production volume is also more than 500,000 tons. The sea mustard is much more than the 600,000 tons. You can see the huge amount of the production volume of these three kinds of the seaweed. As I already mentioned, the Korean people to have the seaweed as a soup, any additional things for salad. Also, and the Korean government is exporting a lot of the seaweed to other countries, including Thailand, United States, China, and Japan. So the seaweed is a good source of the export in Korea. It's a very valuable industry. The lots of the production volume. Also nowadays, and in the world, importance of seaweed is increasing. This year, in the United Nations, we have a sustainable agenda for seaweed, which means we have to promote the seaweed for food and bioenergies, also the materials for cosmetics. Many countries have interest in seaweed. We can share our experience in the seaweed aquaculture with the countries who started now. The picture on the lower side and the upper right side shows labor aquaculture facilities. To produce healthier and good tasty labor, aquaculture labor is exposed in the open air for a certain period. The picture on the middle of the upper side shows drying the sea mustard, and the one on its right shows the harvesting sea mustard in the ocean. As you see in the three people on the fishing boat, they are harvesting the seaweed from the ocean. This is a winter season. Early in the morning, they go to the ocean and harvest the seaweed with a bare hand. Very labor-intensive industry, Using their bare hands, they are harvesting. This is a very difficult work and very hard-working industry. Lots of the volume, as I mentioned already. So the farmers, they go to the ocean very early in the morning. They are harvesting this one. And they are also making process like drying, sorted. Then after the simple processing, they are consuming. Also, we are exporting the seaweed to other countries. Lastly, this table shows the production volume of freshwater aquaculture by category. Total production volume of freshwater aquaculture is very small compared to that of the marine aquaculture. Aquaculture finfish production occupies more than 80% of total, especially in 2017. It is followed by mollusk, crustaceans in order of their production volume. You see that the finfish is predominant in the freshwater aquaculture production. Crustaceans is small. Other the aquatic plants, very rare their production. But in Korea, even though in the freshwater aquaculture production now is a very small, but the government has a project and the plans to promote this freshwater aquaculture production using land-based circulation system and bioplug technology. We want to increase the production volume of the freshwater aquaculture. The finfish, like a trout, the salmons, those are the target species we want to promote more in the freshwater aquaculture. Now, let's talk about the cutting-edge technology, offshore aquaculture system. Offshore aquaculture has several good points compared to conventional inshore and coastal aquaculture. The first, offshore aquaculture is safe against the seasonal typhoons because the net cage stays underwater. For the same reason, the net cage is less visual than conventional ones. Last, the fish can be farmed more densely because of higher carrying capacity of offshore aquaculture. In the offshore situations, water flows faster, which allow higher carrying capacity. You see the top of the offshore aquaculture cage. This is shown to be over the seawater surface. Also, you can see the inside of this offshore aquaculture. You can see many the fish there. Also, you can see the bluefin tuna there. Because we have in the pilot project for offshore aquaculture, we are targeting different species. We are checking how their growth, how their survival rate, also in the feed efficiency from the pilot project. This picture shows the concept of offshore aquaculture system on the Jeju Island, which is the biggest island in Korea. The cages are set and stay on the water, and they are lifted for feeding or harvesting. This is a very good point in the offshore aquaculture system. When we have natural disasters such as typhoons or red tides, we can drop it down to the bottom of the ocean, then we can avoid the natural disasters. When we have a clear the weather or environment, then we can lift it up to over the surface. Then we can feed fish and we can harvest the fish. In the inshore aquaculture systems, coastal aquaculture systems, we cannot adjust their fishing nets. That is the shortcomings the coastal aquaculture system has. But the offshore aquaculture system is different. It has many the strong and good points. This picture shows the operation of offshore aquaculture cage. For most of the time, only small yellow buoy is seen. The foam, the struck sea surface, as you see in the picture on the upper right side. But it is lifted to sea surface when the feed or harvest of farmed fish, as shown in the picture. Meanwhile, the divers are necessary to operate offshore aquaculture, as you see in the picture. It means that the divers feed fish, but nowadays automatic feeding system is developed, and using those in the systems without divers, we can feed the fish inside of the offshore aquaculture cage. Also, we can harvest the fish from the divers, but nowadays also the technology is developed. And using the pump in the sucking fish from the net, we can harvest the fish without any scratches on the surface of fish. This is also another developed technology we can apply to offshore aquaculture systems. This picture describes the inside of the net cage of the offshore aquaculture system when it is settled under the water. You can see the densely farmed fish inside of the offshore aquaculture cage. As I mentioned before, and you see the divers, he's in the feeding fish now, but nowadays no more in the human activities in this offshore aquaculture cage. We have automatic feeding systems, so from the land we can feed the fish using automatic systems. Okay, so now we talk about the current status of Korean aquaculture. Then let's talk about some difficulties the Korean aquaculture face nowadays. The first is over the farming problem. That is the density problem is really serious in South Sea. To be protected from typhoons, aquaculture facilities should be placed between island and the bays. However, those suitable place for aquaculture is already limited. Therefore, aquaculture facilities gathers on limited area very densely. This situation brings low growth rate and the pollution-driven disease outbreak. Second, environmental impacts including seasonal natural disaster exist. The third, legal and regulation system on the aquaculture is too complicated. The fourth, farmed fisheries products are losing consumers' trust as a value of fish food due to the negative image by disease, red tide, and antibiotics. The last, aquaculture business in Korea is not dealing well with the gap between domestic and overseas demand. Domestic consumers' demand on environment-friendly and food-safe farmed products is getting bigger and bigger. However, imports of Korean aquaculture have mainly focused on low-cost fish products. To deal with this gap between domestic and overseas demand, investment for aquaculture engineering is necessary. Nevertheless, aquaculture business in Korea is quantity-oriented, and the investment for technology is still very limited. Korea usually suffers more than 10 times of seasonal storm and 1 to 3 typhoons annually. In 2003, the big and strong typhoon named MEMI caused the damage on the structure worth 83 million US dollar. On the living organisms worth 242 million US dollars. You can see the map upper side is the route of typhoons going through Korean peninsula directly. It caused many economic losses. It caused many economic loss in different industries, including aquaculture and fisheries. Also, in the lower picture, you can see the red tide occurrence. When we have red tide, you can see very in the near, we have lots of aquaculture cages there. So they have direct impact from red tide occurrence. It causes mass mortality of farmed fish. So the economic loss is quite significant. Also, you can see that the dead fish from red tide. Yes, the farmer is gathering, collecting dead fish from the nets. It means the huge economic loss from red tide. In order to overcome these difficulties and the problems I mentioned before, the paradigm of the aquaculture shifted. The future aquaculture should be sustainable, responsible, environment-friendly, ecosystem-based, and food-safe. In order to sustain our aquaculture, we need clean, we need environment-friendly, also the food-safe aquaculture. In order to do that, we need to develop the technologies. I will tell you more details. Let's talk about the details of change the current aquaculture systems. The first, the structure of aquaculture system should be changed. It should be moved from quantity-oriented, intensive, integrated structure to quality and food safety-oriented, extensive, or responsible and environmental sustainable friendly structure. The second, farming sites should be shifted from inshore to offshore. The third, recirculating aquaculture system should be implemented to on-land tanker aquaculture. First, the scale of aquaculture business should be changed from family-managed or small-scale industry to more industrialized and large-scale industry. The fifth, internal and external competitiveness should be improved. One solution for this is developing technologies such as genetic engineering and breeding technology. Another is to minimize disease caused damage by guaranteeing and prevention from epidemics. The other is diminishing production on cost by automatic farming systems. Last, the consumer's trust should be restored. It can be done by performing ecosystem-based aquaculture and reducing aquaculture pollution loads by overall application of a formulated feeds. This is a really important issue nowadays. That we are using the raw fish as a feed in the aquaculture. In Korea, the same things. Almost more than 80% of raw fish is used as a feed in the aquaculture. It causes many negative impacts on the ocean, fishery resources, on consumers. So that's why now the most advanced countries, they are developing formulated the feed for aquaculture. Korea is the same. We are developing technology for formulated feed for aquaculture. The fish stock biomass was decreased, as I mentioned before. Why? Humans are catching more fish, but its caught fish is used for the feed in the aquaculture. More fish is needed for developing aquaculture. That's why more and small fish has been caught by the fisheries for developing aquaculture. Now it's a time to change. We have to develop formulated feed for aquaculture. No more depending on the raw fish. Please remember, this is a very, very important point when we are developing aquaculture from now on. Also, the food safety issue is really important. We used to use antibiotics in aquaculture, but no more nowadays. To increase the volume of aquaculture, we used the drugs, but no more anymore nowadays. To be successful in the aquaculture industry, please remember, we need sustainable, environmental-friendly, food-safe aquaculture development. The last one is another technology beside offshore aquaculture technology. What is called land-based aquaculture, recirculating aquaculture system. Adoption of a recirculation system on the land-based aquaculture farm is necessary and important. Recirculating aquaculture system will minimize the quantity of polluted water discharged into nature. Also, it can mitigate the damages caused by natural disasters such as red tide, a strange water temperature with a closed system. The other strong point of recirculating aquaculture system is that the controlling the breeding environment is very easy. So, and for your country, you want to develop aquaculture industry, your own countries. But now it's a technology maybe in the limited. Also, in the management of the aquaculture is also the limited. For that, FAO, Food and Agriculture Organizations of the United Nations, they published best practice activities for aquaculture. They already published the manuals for best practice for aquaculture. Then maybe the one way you can follow those in the guidance and the manuals. Also, and the government should pay attention to technology development. Even in the initial stage of the aquaculture, please please do not increase the volume of the aquaculture. The first, you have to estimate the carrying capacity of the aquaculture ground. You have to consider optimal aquaculture facilities according to carrying capacity in the aquaculture ground. That is the most important point. Within carrying capacity, you can develop your aquaculture sustainably. In Korea, we failed to sustain our aquaculture within carrying capacity. Now we have some indications of that the bad behavior. But nowadays in the finfish aquaculture, their production volume is started to decrease since 2011. Why? Pollution problems. Coastal area is polluted by land-based aquaculture or sea cage aquaculture systems. It discharges pollutants, residuals of feed. They just discharged to the ocean. It caused many pollutions. Polluted water also going back to the aquaculture cages. It causes the disease. they increase the mortality of farmed fish. So, and the survival rate is decreasing nowadays. It means that the business profitability is decreasing nowadays. Consumers, they are watching TV. It shows that very the bad image of the aquaculture, using raw fish as a feed, using antibiotics, using some drugs and medicines in the aquaculture. Consumers' trust on the aquaculture is also decreasing. As the outcome, the market price is decreasing nowadays. It causes huge economic damages to aquaculture farms. No more those things. We need to change. That's why I'm telling you the Korean experience. You have to be successful. You have to be successful in your own country's aquaculture development. But now Korea is also, we are trying to change the way of the aquaculture, the method of aquaculture. Within the carrying capacity, we are developing aquaculture cages in the aquaculture farms, in the aquaculture grounds. But this is a very initial step for the future aquaculture development. It is late, but we have to go now. So I also emphasized the technology development. But nowadays, international cooperation is getting important and important. The Korea also has international relations with other countries like China, Myanmar, Vietnam, Cambodia, and some African countries. So, and from the cooperation, though we can develop our aquaculture sustainably in the world together. Okay, I will finish my second part of my lecture here. I will show you the third part later. Thank you.